We had a look at social media. It's a privilege to have had this interaction. I had a very disparate group and we had wide-ranging discussions. Perhaps we could just start with the ESC's main social media platforms at the moment are Facebook, and these are the metrics of who uses that platform. So you can see a few more men than women. That possibly reflects the fact that there are a few more men in cardiology still than there are women, although we're coming along, don't you worry. You can see a very striking age range here. So 25 to 34-year-olds and below use Facebook a great deal. There's some enthusiasts in the age group 35 to 44, and really anybody over that doesn't know what it's for. And Twitter is much the same. Again, the male-female ratio is similarly slightly weighted towards men, and users of Twitter, if anything, are slightly younger than the people who use Facebook. And anybody old, again, has no idea what it's for. So we talked a great deal about what people do use it for now. This peak age group of Facebook and Twitter being 25 to 35. In the US particularly, people had experience of these platforms being used to advertise clinical trials and to get patients involved in enrolling in such trials, and use for marketing feedback from devices. There was a very striking difference between what I would call the more mature people in my group and the younger people. Those of us who are a bit older were going, well, you just go to the online textbook and you look at the guidelines, whereas our younger members were very clear that younger people did not want to do that. It was much easier for them to access these sorts of things via a platform like Facebook, which could then send them towards the particular bit of a guideline or the textbooks and so on that they wanted. And we've seen that particularly with one of these apps that was demonstrated earlier, that it cuts out you having to look through a whole lot of stuff to find what you want. Things like Facebook, Twitter and Instagram are being used very widely for quizzes and training purposes to get people to understand what knowledge they need and so on. The difficulties are that everybody's an expert, and you read these things and you have no idea if the person who has commented is an incredibly eminent professor or, the bus driver from down the road. If people put up things that are of inferior quality, this was a particular worry for people who do imaging, so inadequate quality images are uploaded and they're there then forever. And material that's not necessarily accurate, again, stays there forever. It is very easy to forget about patient consent. And the older generation of people is just not very experienced with using this sort of platform. We had a lot of discussion about behaviour on social media, and there's a general feeling across all age groups that it's a place for discussion but not open argument. I don't know what it's been like over the rest of of Europe, but certainly in the UK at the moment, most of our politicians are falling foul of inadvisable things they might have put on these platforms 7 or 8 years ago, which come back then to bite them when they get a posh new job, and everyone comes out of the woodwork saying you're not suitable to do this because you made an adverse comment a long time ago. So it is there forever. There was a feeling that when guidelines and knowledge resources get updated, actually they don't necessarily get updated when they're on these platforms, and something needs to be done to try and manage that. And one of the other difficulties is that for things like Facebook, which many people use for their social, family, sharing holiday snaps, etc., there was a concern that the blurring of professional and social boundaries could become a difficulty. That do you really want your patients to see you in your bikini on your holiday? Or whatever else might be happening. And we need to think a bit when we use these platforms about that blurring. People had some experience of TripAdvisor type polls on how good is your doctor, and had the same concerns that people have voiced about TripAdvisor, that people who are satisfied generally don't comment and only people who are dissatisfied do. So you can get a very skewed idea of what a person is like using these platforms that is not necessarily fair. So having set that scene as the challenges and limitations and how it's used at the moment, I'm just going to hand over to Afzal, who will tell you our thoughts about where the ESC could go.
Thanks, Alison. And it was a great opportunity to work with everyone. And we came up with quite a few ideas. So, I mean, there are huge opportunities for the ESC to help develop its social media platform and help with the development when it comes to training and mentoring of cardiologists of tomorrow. One thing that things like Twitter especially allow you to do is to interact with a broad range of opinions, and it allows young and experienced or cardiologists in training to interact and engage in a conversation on Twitter with people who are much more experienced, who might be world leaders in their area. So at the moment, as we've seen already, the ESC are running some very successful social media outlets in Facebook and Twitter, which have very high take-up with young people. And one thing that we did find in our group is actually there are other social media platforms which actually have quite a lot of reach and quite a lot of engagement, and Pinterest and ResearchGate were two examples. And I think in that respect, the ESC continues to need to be vigilant of changing trends and trying to keep up to date with whichever platforms are most popular and most useful for everyone. As we alluded to earlier, it's a great outlet for promoting things, and even though the ESC website may be the hub for where all of the information is stored in terms of guidelines and information about congresses, social media probably is one of the most effective ways of promoting some of these activities and engaging people to get them onto the website. People may not automatically want to come to the ESC website directly. The emails from ESC may go to junk folders. I think, as somebody mentioned earlier, 89% of email tends to go to spam folders. So social media might be a more effective way of promoting this information. So one of the themes we mentioned are blended learning. So we talk about face-to-face activities like this and face-to-face activities at the congresses and courses. But social media allows us to promote blended learning, so combining some of that face-to-face interaction with e-learning. So certainly the Facebook quizzes, which have been up and running for some time, have been very popular, and there are great opportunities to develop that further. There were some concerns that actually discussing clinical cases on Facebook may be of some concern to some people because, as Alison mentioned earlier, people do use some of these social media platforms for personal and social use rather than for professional use. So there has to be some thought about how this is executed. And in terms of going through complex cases, it's because it's a very dynamic and interactive. Most social media platforms are very dynamic and interactive. It allows you to kind of take somebody through a case and make the whole process a lot more interactive and dynamic. So there was a mention of talking about a clinical case. You might talk about the first clinical presentation, get some opinions, and then go on to the next stage and present the results of an investigation and make it very interactive. So guidelines and education and promoting Congress activities are quite well established, but we thought that there might be an opportunity to use social media, especially things like YouTube and other video platforms like Periscope, to use it to show some how-to tutorials. New England Journal have some very successful videos on how to put in central lines and chest drains, which are quite high quality and very useful for doctors in training. And certainly there's an opportunity to do that in cardiology as well, to provide some high quality, high fidelity videos on how to do various procedures potentially. A lot of the national societies do a lot of good work when it comes to patient education, so educational videos and educational information leaflets. But not every national society will have the resources to provide that high quality content or the video information, and certainly there's a role for the ESC to work with national societies to develop some of these patient education tools which can be promoted via social media. Just to summarize there, so I think blended learning, trying to improve the amount of content which is available, improving the amount of interaction ESC has with its wider audience through social media and vice versa are essential for the future. And providing a bit of peer review. One of the challenges, as we mentioned, is that everyone is an expert on Facebook and Twitter, and you don't necessarily know who is reliable and who isn't. And the ESC has a role potentially to provide some high quality peer review and supervision of some of this interaction online. In the challenges we mentioned, that potentially there's the issue of online harassment, online bullying, and inadvertent arguments necessarily, which can cause problems. And there's potentially a role for the ESC to define a code of good conduct. So allowing people to really get an idea of what is best practice for using social media online. And especially, I think, we saw on that very first graph that the majority of users are mainly in the kind of 25 to 35 age bracket. There's a huge opportunity for ESC to support some of its more experienced members to come online on social media. I think there's a huge benefit for some of those more experienced members of the ESC to come online and provide their expertise and keep up to date and provide their knowledge and insight to some of the younger cardiologists as well. So that really summarises our discussions. There was a lot to talk about, and it's very hard to distill it into a couple of slides, but hopefully we've done that.
It's fantastic. Thank you. Hello. Do we have any questions or comments for the first group? If you can just say your name and country, just wait for the camera guys to come and find you.
Okay. Where is camera?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm Spendelesi from Kosovo. I mean, it's a lot of discussion nowadays about this phenomenon, but also in health we are very much aware, like this fear for vaccination. So we should include, I think, in a challenging point that the reinforcing preconception and groupthink, because this is what they're doing actually with this algorithm in Facebook and all those. It's very, very challenging situation and problem with the social media.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it is a great opportunity to try and redress some of those balances. I mean, fears about vaccination is an absolutely key thing, and one can imagine there could easily be myths disseminated widely about cardiological things that one would feel you needed to get the other side of the story back out again. And certainly official platforms like the ESC have got a unique opportunity to do that, which we failed in the UK to do completely with the MMR vaccine scandal some years ago, which I'm sure you all know about. Yes, I agree with you. We should try to avoid that again.
But would it be possible just to add one?
Yeah.
Like short reinforcing preconception and group thinking, something.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions? Social media? Yeah.
Paolo Calabro from Italy. I think there is a big problem, and you mentioned at the beginning about the consensus for patients, especially if you put some pictures or some information about some operation or intervention that a physician has done, and also about the authorization from the hospitals. What do you think can be arranged? Okay, what do you think that the ESC can do for this?
So I think we mentioned that certainly one very easy thing we could do is write a code of conduct. So give some guidance on clinicians about if they are going to post any material about patients, what's the bare minimum they should do in terms of consent. I imagine every hospital itself and every country has slightly varying policies on how information can be disseminated. In the UK, the GMC's got a very clear set of guidelines on how physicians should use social media. I mean, the other opportunity where the ESC probably adds value is that it has its own specific clinical case gallery where these checks and balances can be done in a bit more of a formal manner. So that offers a very kind of safe way of sharing information. But other than that, I think certainly there's an opportunity for the ESC to kind of clarify a code of good conducts and good practice.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move on to group 2.